Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment.
Today, we're speaking with Kevin Jakel, founder and CEO of Unified Patents, a company that deters non-practicing entities from monetizing patents in strategic technology areas. Prior to founding Unified Patents, Kevin served as Intuit's head of IP litigation and began his career in IP as a patent examiner at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. He has a JD from George Washington University Law School and a BS in mechanical engineering from UCLA. Let's get started.
Hello, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
I am so grateful that you actually came all the way from Bethesda to Reston and have this really cool setting.
Yeah, no, it looks great. This is quite professional. I appreciate all the
quite
the
professional.
effort.
Yes, only the best for you. I just want to acknowledge how grateful I am to you and everyone at the Unified Patents for helping me and supporting me for the first 5 years of my journey. And It has been amazing. And through COVID, I find out that you were also an Howrey alumni.
Yes, I'm also a Howrey alumni, along with a bunch of other great people.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Finnegan alumni there, but the Howrey alumni, I was like, wait a minute, he's also from Howrey. So That's awesome.
Yeah, that's old school.
That is old school. Well, let's get started. Our podcast today, you are actually titling that as Protecting Technology for Tomorrow's Future. Yep. Would you mind sharing with our audience why?
One of the things that we do as a company is try to protect technologies. And one thing that I find is really interesting about the patent world, just generally, is that patents are only a sword. They're not a shield. So, companies have built large portfolios. They've invested in IP. They've done a whole lot of work in order to build out an IP portfolio. Unfortunately, no matter how big your portfolio is, no matter how strong your IP development practice is, it doesn't protect you against being sued because your patent portfolio doesn't work as a shield when it comes especially to non-practicing entities and patent troll litigation. So one of the things that we see as a unique opportunity for us to play a role in this ecosystem is to try to protect companies from litigation, from NPE activity, and from patent trolls. And in doing so, we really do feel like we are helping companies protect the technologies they are developing, protect those technologies. Because even though any one litigation, whether you're a large company or a small company, whenever you're spending money on defending yourself against a meritless litigation, especially if a patent is invalid, and we find the prior art to show that, that is a waste of money. It drains resources. It takes away from management time. It does a whole lot of things to companies that, in our opinion, ultimately takes away from the opportunity for those companies to develop new products, to do new R&D, to invest in people and bring opportunities to kind of bring technology into the future. So, what we do, we think really does help kind of protect technology for development and future, and trying to get rid of kind of meritless litigation when it comes to using invalid patents is something that we feel like is not just a cost savings right now, but it ultimately ends up protecting technologies in the future.
Now you talk about NPE. Most of the people in our space know what NPE is, non-practicing entities. Can you talk a little bit about what NPE is for people that are lay persons?
NPEs are, as you mentioned, non-practicing entities. Essentially, it's a company often created as a shell company, in many cases only days before litigation might be started or demand letters might be sent. The shell company ultimately ends up owning the patent. The company doesn't do anything. So the company doesn't make anything. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't do all those things. It's an entity designed for the monetization of the patent that has been put into that entity. The company, the new LLC, will own the patent, and that only function for that company is to monetize that patent, often through litigation. And so since it doesn't do anything, it is considered non-practicing. The reason that is important is because, as I was kind of talking about, people develop patent portfolios because there's a sense of mutual assured destruction. You know, if one large company has a big patent portfolio and they're sued by another company, well, that patent portfolio can be used to countersue the other one back. And so many companies have large overlapping patent portfolios as an important strategy to protecting themselves and defending themselves against litigation. But when it comes to NPEs or patent trolls, sometimes patent trolls would be like the pejorative term for NPEs.
Yes, very much
so, yeah, ultimately the point is that they don't make anything, and therefore they can't be countersued. So they are not susceptible to the same kind of defenses that a company that's built its own patent portfolio, has invested in its own technology, has received patents that cover its products and services. And when that company is sued by an NPE, all of that investment is essentially, not worthless, but it is not effective as a counter strategy to sue the NPE. As such, that NPE has a bit of a strategic advantage over the company in litigation because the costs of discovery are basically none on the NPE because there's nothing to turn over in discovery. The costs are kind of like all intensely borne by the defending company that has been accused of patent infringement. That's kind of why we have a term for this type of entity, is because of the kind of difference in position between the two. It is not a company that is susceptible to countersuit, and we use the term kind of non-practicing entity, NPE, or in some cases patent troll, to kind of talk about the context of what that company does when it uses patents to assert in litigation while using the structure of that entity as a kind of competitive advantage in the litigation.
That's quite fascinating.
And there's a lot of this litigation. That's the thing about this whole situation is, there's a demand in the industry for what Unified does. Unfortunately, because there is so much litigation. Right now, we're hovering at about 3,500 litigations a year being brought by entities that kind of meet this definition. So it's a lot of litigation. Each one of those litigations costs a whole bunch of money to defend, and they cost a whole bunch of money often to settle. The truth is that very few of these litigations ever reach it to trial. So the vast majority of this ends up being settled, which ends up being a cost on the companies, which ends up being a situation where they have less money to invest in new technology and management and developing new people and R&D and all the different things we talked about. So this is the scope of the problem and the definition of why kind of understanding the context around NPE activity and the litigation is relevant to why Unified exists and why we feel like we need to be out there helping to defend against NPE activity so that we can develop technologies for the future.
So I used to be, just a little bit before we get into the founder story, I just wanted to share with you that I started out as a construction litigation paralegal. Then I decided, I was like, I don't know that I really like construction that much. I had really good, mentors. And then I decided that I want to do the GW Paralegal Certificate Program. Mm-hmm. And I had a professor who used to be an associate at Morgan Lewis. So he taught me like IP. And before I finished my classes, he asked me, he was like, are you going to stick with construction litigation? I was like, not likely. And he then asked me, why don't you look into IP litigation? I said, but I don't know anything about IP other than doing well in the class. He was like, do you know anything about construction before? I'm like, no. So that was the encouragement that I got. That's how I got into Howrey.
Yeah.
I was actually interviewed with a couple of partners and I asked them really serious questions and people were like, why do you have so many questions? I'm like, the interview is two-way street. I want to know that I'm not just going into a sweatshop and giving all my time. And that was kind of the reputation at the time. So that was really interesting. And that's kind of how I got into IP. And eventually I want to specialize. Because Howrey was still a GP firm, and so I wanted to specialize, and then I decided to go to Finnegan. That's really specialized. And then almost close to 2 decades of litigation, all in patent, nothing trademark, nothing like trade secrets or anything like that. So really serious in patent litigation. So it's really interesting to hear how, a litigator that turned your passion into something else that helped the industry. Can you share your founder story now from engineering to law and to startup founder.
It's a little lengthy, but we'll see if we can keep it an abridged version for you. I went into engineering at UCLA. To be honest, I was good in math and science. I really didn't have a great plan, or there was no magic strategy to it. I did love engineering, went into engineering, graduated UCLA with mechanical engineering, and went to work with what was then TRW, building satellites for the government. So my very small claim to fame in this world is that I've touched a satellite that is currently in space flying right now. That's one of my typical 2 truths and a lie is that I've touched something that's currently in space.
Well, as long as we're being candid here.
Secret's out now. But ultimately, when I went to engineering, I loved it. I got an opportunity to participate in some advanced programs to kind of bid for the next generation space telescope, which became the James Webb Space Telescope, and worked on a whole bunch of things, very kind of forward thinking, very kind of technology focused, and I loved it. And ultimately, however, I was looking at kind of the path of an engineer career, and I just didn't think it was necessarily for me. So I started looking at law school because I had always had a desire to do law school. And in doing so, I made the decision to jump from engineering into law, moved to Washington, D.C., went to GW for law school. I also worked at the patent office for a little while. So getting an opportunity to see kind of how the sausage is made and get a look behind the scenes, understanding what's going on with the patent office, both the good and the bad. I mean, it's a wonderful organization and they do great work. It is also the case that a lot of examiners don't have enough time to always do the detailed work that's needed in order to make sure that the patents come out of the patent office are always valid and enforceable. So kind of seeing that, kind of understanding it has played a big role in, my view of patents, patent quality, what we can do to fix that, all of those things. And ultimately, I then went to work at Howrey way back in the day. Started in the patent prosecution world, did patent prosecution, very quickly started doing litigation as well. Howrey had a reputation, as you mentioned, back in the day, but I ended up loving the Howrey office here in DC, and I felt like it was a great place to kind of cut my teeth on a young lawyer career. So patent prosecution, litigation. Ultimately, I ended up moving to a firm called Kaye, Scholer, did almost exclusively patent litigation at that point. Also used a lot of re-examination, ex parte and inter partes re-examinations back in the day on behalf of clients that I was working for. I'll have to be honest, I did all kinds of litigation, both plaintiff and defendant. I've seen both sides of the fence as a litigator, both bringing litigation and defending against it. Ultimately, my wife and I decided to quit big law, and so we went in-house. She's a lawyer as well. We moved to California. I got a job as head of IP litigation for Intuit and kind of basically managed a litigation docket for Intuit for a number of years. At the time, one thing that was interesting is that probably 90+% of the litigation docket for Intuit was NPE activity. Although I'd had some exposure to both defending NPE litigation and bringing NPE litigation back when I was outside counsel, I really didn't get a good in-house view until I went to work in-house at Intuit and really started to understand what a pain it was for companies to deal with NPE litigation. It wasn't just one lawyer in an office dealing with it. You then got to go talk to the business unit. You got to talk to the head person, explain to them what's going on, explain to them we're going to need to dig in and understand how the products and services are working and figure out if there's a potential infringement issue or not. Dig into the patent itself and try to figure out if it's valid or not. And, then ultimately you end up going up to management and distracting them with trying to figure out how do you, here's the strategy that I'm proposing, but it might not meet with the kind of financial goals or situation that the company is in any given moment. So sometimes you fight, sometimes you don't. But all in all, when you're talking about defending against a bunch of NPEs that are asking for a relatively small amount of money, significantly less than the cost to litigate, unfortunately, the truth is that management will often look at the cost to litigate and the cost to settle, and they pick the cost to settle all the time.
Yes.
And that's not just Intuit. I mean, the vast majority of companies out there, almost no one litigates and fights all the time. It's just too expensive. And so the cost to settle is something that, almost all companies kind of participate in. And people currently are in my shoes will know, we don't get to fight very often, or if at all. I never got to take any of my cases to trial. We did win a few of them, but we never ended up going to trial. So this is kind of getting that level of exposure, kind of understanding the business side of how companies deal with NPE activity played a massive role in this. And then eventually I started trying to figure out, well, how do we do something that pushes back on that activity? How do we find a way to make Intuit less likely to be sued rather than more likely? You know, there are solutions out there that essentially buy licenses to NPEs. An NPE sues a bunch of companies, you buy a license, you pass it out. The problem is that ultimately every time companies settle, either themselves or through third parties, in many cases those settlements end up funding the NPE, making them profitable. Some of that profit is put in the pocket, and some of that profit is put into buying a new patent and doing this activity over and over and over again. So if you could always get good patents and do this every single time on a valid, enforceable patent that had great infringement reads, well then there would be, there's not really a problem. Everyone would be like, okay, well this is just how the system works. But the problem is that so many patents, when the validity or the enforceability or other aspects of an enforcement campaign are looked at in detail, so many patents are ultimately invalid. It's a frustrating reality. If you look at the stats, this is true even in litigation. Even when companies choose to fight, likelihood of being able to show that a patent is either unenforceable or invalid, or in some cases not infringed as well. Truth is, very few cases are wildly successful, but it costs so much to take that fight all the way the distance, especially when the amount that is often being settled for is a small amount. That kind of NPE activity is something that is frustrating to a lot of people. So I came up with a way at Unified ultimately to try to push back on that by doing what we call deterrence. And that is that we work on behalf of technology areas, something we call zones. And in doing so, we're paid by a whole bunch of companies into that zone. We use the collective amount to do what we want, to pick and choose the right patents to challenge and the right entities to push back on in order to show that those patents should never have issued in the first place. We've never had enough money to go after every patent out there. That is not the strategy. The strategy is to show that some of these patents should never have issued. And in doing so, make the patent owners change their behavior. If they're going to do this activity, make sure that they buy good patents. If they're going to do this activity, make sure they've done due diligence on the whole process so that they're not enforcing patents that with a decent amount of work on our end, we can show should never have issued in the first place. They could do the same kind of work that we do in advance, and that kind of due diligence would end up cutting out a lot of the patents that should ultimately not be enforced. And there are entities out there that do that. There are entities that do lots and lots of upfront work. In most cases, we're unable to invalidate those patents. We look at them. We look at lots of patents only and find that they're not invalid. But we also look at more patents and find that we actually probably can invalidate them. And we go after as many as we can that we have our own funding to do. And in doing so, we think we deter people from kind of going back and back and back to the same trough over and over and over again. So that's the Unified story. And I was just lucky enough to have had a career where many of the individual pieces needed in order to see and execute on Unified patents were pieced together from all the different things I had done up until the point that I started the company.
I think what's most fascinating about that is that because I work primarily in firms prior to starting my own company, I think a lot of it is like people are missing a lot of lawyers. They are good litigators, but not necessarily really understanding the business behind the scene. So I thought that observing how you have grown your company with the team, obviously, it really makes a lot of sense on how things are scaling with that business sense. So I just want to let you know that.
I appreciate that. I think we do a good job of trying to balance both the legal side and the business side of the company and focus a lot on that. And I think that understanding the business side of NPE litigation when I was in-house has played a critical role in understanding how to make sure that Unified gets what's going on, understands the kind of economics on both sides, and then can do good work that ultimately ends up deterring more NPE litigation, and also something that allows us to provide something of true value for the companies that participate, kind of freeing up the creative freedom to use in the technology areas we protect so that they can continue to develop in that area, invest in the R&D, knowing that area is going to see less of a drag on it from NPE litigation because we're there to protect that technology.
How has your story influenced your approach to patent strategy and IP protection?
I mentioned at the first that companies that build up large patent portfolios, it's a great strategy for kind of positioning yourself defensively against peer companies and against lots of companies out there that see you as encroaching on their IP. Having kind of a defensive portfolio for doing that, it creates value. You can sell those patents. There's a lot of activity and great aspects of the building a patent portfolio and kind of working on patent strategy. My kind of course through my career has kind of focused on, ever since I kind of left outside counsel, I've not intentionally, it's not like I left, being a litigator as outside counsel to want to focus
hours?
not just the late nights at Howrey, but I didn't really see myself as investing in a career of dealing with NPE litigation for the rest of my life. So it is the case that the vast majority of patent litigation in the high-tech space, it comes from NPE activity. I think the numbers are upwards of 85% in some technology areas. It is predominantly NPE activity. There are a few other technologies where it's less and less, but there's some technology areas where the NPE activity is relatively low. But ultimately, we're in a situation where if you happen to be in the high-tech space, you, as a litigator, you might end up spending your entire career working on NPE activity. And so from my perspective, kind of dealing with this has ultimately given me a sense of an impact on how I view patent strategy and a kind of IP management. And in most cases, that's one thing that companies need to kind of understand, is that I would want to do a whole lot of work to educate business leaders and others around the fact that your patent portfolio is not going to protect you against NPE activity. Lots and lots of business owners and others will, at least they did back in the day when I was representing them, ask, well, we've got all these patents. Why are we getting sued? And unfortunately, as I mentioned, patents are only a sword. They're not a shield. They're not going to stop someone else from suing you on a patent. So my career has taken a bit of a niche approach where now I'm super focused on NPEs and NPE activity. We've kind of moved into helping on standard essential patent issues and other things as well, and I love doing all that work. But in many ways, it's kind of making sure that there's an opportunity to inform companies about alternatives to working on patent strategies, that making sure they understand that there's going to be NPE litigation, there's going to be some roadblocks that are thrown up, and understanding that patent portfolio investing in it is going to help you in some respects, but it's going to do kind of nothing against NPE activity. And unfortunately, that's kind of one of the biggest areas that most patent litigators are going to be dealing with, is NPE activity. My career is taking me in such a way that it's really impacted the way I see the operation of companies and how they deal with intellectual property issues, and in particular how they deal with patent litigation. The vast majority of the problem ends up being from NPE activity.
I think one of the things that makes Unified very successful in this area is that, when we all start our career, we have to be a generalist because we don't know what we don't know. And then at some point, I love the fact that you use the word niche practice, because that's really how I also started my own company. I wanted to be there for everyone because I need to pay my bills, right? And at some point, I think it's probably year 2 or year 3 that I decided not to take on any litigation besides PTAB. I did expand to ex parte because the two things kind of go hand in hand, but I'm a small company. I am not going to be there to deal with CBI information because, one mishap will just shut me down.
Yeah.
And also, I didn't leave the space to go do more work. right? So I just thought that that was really interesting. I wanted to make that comment and let you know how savvy you are.
Well, we are big fans of yours, and we think your professionalism and the energy you bring to kind of the day-to-day stuff is something that we love having you on board, and it's been awesome to see you kind of blossom over the years. It's been incredible to watch you start your company and grow.
One thing that I do really like, I owe a lot of this to Unify, but a lot of it is that I'm a huge fan of Jonathan Stroud.
Yeah, we all are.
Yes.
You
I owe myself too,
owe.
but
Yeah, I mean, you built it. You took the leap and you did the hard work, and we're beneficiaries of the work. It was not charity. We ended up getting a whole lot of value add from bringing you on and working with you. So it wasn't charity.
Well, it's mutual respect. How about that?
Excellent.
Excellent. All right, let's share about your philosophy of Unified Patents and all the affiliated companies. And can you also briefly talk about how the different zones work?
Sure. So first of all, to talk about the zones for a second. I mean, to your point about kind of specializing and not being just general. So you can just say, okay, well, if there's any NPE litigation out there, we'll try to fight it. That doesn't ultimately end up being effective for us, because what we want NPEs to look at is say, okay, well, there's a technology area that Unified is covering. If we focus on technology areas that Unified's not focusing, we can do whatever we want. That's ultimately deterrence, is what we want. So we want to kind of specialize, to your point. You can't just do everything. And so what we came up with is a strategy around creating what we call zones. It's basically a technology definition. And if the patent or the accused product fits the zone definition, then we consider that to be zone activity. And we look to see, is this litigation or a patent that is ripe for us to try to disrupt this monetization campaign? Because we can do the research and find out that the patent's invalid. We're not always successful, like I mentioned, but a lot of times we are. And then when we challenge the patent, ultimately we end up killing it. We are highly successful at doing this. And because of that, it means that we cut short that monetization campaign. We disrupt it in such a way that that zone, that technology area itself, ultimately doesn't see as much litigation and as much disruption as it would if we weren't doing the work in that area. And we hope, and we think we've seen it, that then the next time people are looking to buy patents or monetize in that space, we are making that space kind of less likely to be sued. In essence, we're generating freedom to operate in that technology area, and we do that across zones. And we have, at this point, we have like 10 of them. So we've kind of slowly but surely opened up new zones over time. And in doing so, we have great technology areas that we work on behalf of. So that's how the zones themselves work. The philosophy of it, I kind of also went through it. It's one of deterrence. We do the same thing in the trademark space. We have another business we call brands, where ultimately we are identifying counterfeit opportunities to identify sellers on e-commerce platforms. And we ultimately want to deter them from doing this activity, because when we sue them for trademark infringement, ultimately we freeze all of their bank accounts and ultimately then collect money. But the goal here is, we're going to collect some money. That is really great. But the real goal is that the client, the companies whose trademarks we're using for the trademark infringement, we want them to see less counterfeit activity on e-commerce platforms after we're done going out and seizing bank accounts from people. We're disrupting what they're doing, making it more difficult for them to, kind of successfully make money by selling counterfeit goods on e-commerce platforms. So this idea of kind of working on behalf of companies, doing our best to stay aligned with their goals and their financial interests, is what we think has really been a bit of the guiding light for Unified, is to stay focused on operating companies, stay focused on what they need, and slowly but surely kind of bring products to market that help them do what they do best, which is sell products and services without having to worry about both patent infringement or counterfeit goods. So there's a little bit of philosophy and a strategy behind what we do, is using deterrence to help protect those companies now and in the future.
And you guys also have a new service, is it IP services?
We do have IP services. So prior art searching, freedom to operate searches, and other forms of services, we've opened that up, and it's a big area for us that we're looking to work on in the future. I think it's a great fit for us. Obviously, we do lots of our own prior art searching, so having an in-house search firm is something that I think makes a whole lot of sense. But it's something that we think ultimately lots of companies can use. It's something we think is a natural fit when we think about our focus on patent quality, on whether a patent should have ever issued in the first place. Prior art makes up a huge component of that.
My observation about the philosophy of Unify is teach, not sell, in the sense that you actually regularly hold two conferences. One in Washington, D.C. I just went to that when we had quite a panel on SEP discussion, standard essential patents, as well as the Santa Clara University School of Law. So I thought that that was really, and you could certainly charge money, but you guys did not. So it's like the sponsors who actually come together and made those conferences very successful and very much needed in terms of the education for the business partners and the industry leaders. So I thought that I would give you a shout out. How about that?
I appreciate it. I love it. From the beginning, we've been holding conferences that are free. We do have sponsorships, which help cover some of the cost of food, drinks, and facilities. But it is a good opportunity for us to kind of give back. The one thing that you didn't mention, which I'm proud of, is that we do it in conjunction with law firms. Law students and others get to come to the event as well. And we think it's a great opportunity for young law students to get some exposure to seasoned, cynical lawyers.
Until they become one.
Let's see. Not if I could talk them out of it.
Not on the open podcast. Anyway, I thought that it was really interesting in how it's actually creating so much synergy between the different spaces and in the IP and the patent ecosystem. Yes.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for doing that. You didn't know that you were going into that, but hey, I'm glad that you were, and your team. Can we talk about how can innovative companies effectively defend themselves against non-NPE to secure technological advancements?
This is a difficult one. I mean, like I said, you just building a patent portfolio does not protect you against NPE activity. But one of the things you can obviously do is participate in Unified. There are other third-party services that I want to give a shout out to because I think they're important for the ecosystem. RPX is another entity out there primarily buying patents and doing licensing activity. There's another entity called AST, which companies kind of participate in. Ultimately, they are also buying patents and getting licenses to those companies that kind of participate in that transaction. And then there's another entity out there called Lot Network. Lot stands for License on Transfer, and basically it's an agreement that companies who participate, if they sell their patents to a patent troll, then a license is given to everyone else who's participating in Lot Network. Innovative approach to it, and one thing I think should be kind of called out for companies looking to kind of protect themselves. And obviously, like I said, there's another one, OIN, does kind of some similar stuff in kind of the licensing world. It's kind of a collective group of companies. In that sense, they're focused around open source technologies. And so it's a little bit more narrow, a little bit more focused. But ultimately, the license activity can help protect companies from those patents landing in the hands of people and being used in NPE activity. So all of these things will, depending on the situation and where your company is, can ultimately play a role in helping defend you against NPE activity. I mean, I think that Unified is a really integral solution as part of that, but I would also say that you really have to look at kind of everything. When NPEs kind of get their hands on patents and they've already done that, well, Lot Network isn't going to solve anything. Neither is OIN or AST for that matter. If someone gets their hands on something and it hasn't passed through those organizations, well, then it's left up to see how you handle it after that. So we kind of come in at a particular point in the ecosystem where we think companies would love to kind of participate in Unified, have us work on behalf of technology areas, and ultimately do work so that their products and services that fit within our zones are less likely to be sued in the future. So this is, an ecosystem of a number of different entities, all playing kind of slightly different roles. And I encourage anyone who's got questions about that, I'm always available. It's a holistic group of solutions that I think are needed if you're going to try to really have a strategy to protect yourself against NPE activity.
And your contact information is actually on World Wide Web, but actually on show notes too. People can find you. How about talk about the development of AI and how can patent system adapt to better support the protection of cutting edge innovations? in your opinion? A lot of fortune telling today,
yeah,
eh?
this to be honest, this is a tough one. To be totally fair, this is something that Jonathan Stroud should be answering.
Well, alongside with litigation funding.
Yeah, and litigation funding too. I think there's a lot of good work being done right now to kind of focus on AI. It is a burgeoning area. We have seen this before. This is not completely unique to AI. There have been the emergence of kind of really groundbreaking technologies and figuring out how you both protect them and how you ultimately protect some of the work product that comes out of this. These are issues that we are kind of grappling with as an industry right now. Ultimately, I do think that what companies need to do, what we need to do as kind of like as a community is continue to keep the dialogue open around figuring out exactly how the protection of AI is going to work in the development of it as a technology. There are people far smarter than me that are kind of figuring out the metes and bounds of what is ultimately going to be protected and what is not. And I don't think we're going to get it perfectly right. I mean, it will take years of figuring out exactly where it should be. And my personal approach to this would be for us all to be patient, to be comfortable with the fact that, we might not get it exactly right the first time around. And there might need to be some changes here that are made. But unfortunately, there are probably going to be some patent owners who got patents on particular areas of AI that ultimately end up being pulled back. Like we might pull back what is actually patentable in the AI world between now and when the dust settles on this. I think that is the kind of the word of caution for kind of everyone seeking patent protection here is just be cautious and recognize that I don't know that we're going to have it right on day one. If we all kind of recognize the metes and bounds of what ultimately gets protected in this new arena might change, I think in the long run, we're going to have an easier time of kind of dealing with a transition in the IP space to a lot of patents that cover AI and possibly a lot of assertions in the AI space. We've been developing our own AI tools for a decade now. We used to call them machine learning, but essentially they're AI. We've been working in this space for quite some time. I think it's just we kind of all have to recognize that, this is going to be a work in progress for a few years until we've got something that it settles in on and the kind of industry moves forward from there.
Yeah, I think it's so important that when you just mentioned about AI itself is such a large term, but there's so many different tiers and people use it so loosely.
Yes, right now AI is used rather loosely.
Very loosely. You just mentioned
like
machine learning, there's so many different tiers. And one of the things that I actually do have working with some of the women in AI that talks about this, especially regarding guide railing and then ethical AI and how do you actually practice those responsibly, those are very important questions to make sure that the ecosystem as they evolve, we're going in the right direction.
Fortunately, I don't think any of the tools we've developed over the years cross the line into the ethical questions.
Oh no, but there are a lot of things out there.
I'm just lucky that I'm not in the large language model world.
That's really scary sometimes.
We've all the tools we build, I think, are relatively innocuous. Makes me happy that I don't have to deal with those issues.
Yep, you have the ethical ecosystem. Having started multiple companies now, what advice would you give to startup and emerging tech companies when developing their IP strategy and balances protecting their invention? Because sometimes it doesn't make sense,
Yeah, this is the $1 million question.
I don't have $1 million for you, sorry.
No, I wish. If this advice was worth $1 million, I'd be in a different business.
I'll give you a show notes.
So I think that this is a complicated question, and it really depends on where a company is in its life cycle and where it's going. But investing in intellectual property and in key technologies that you are developing is a kind of critical aspect of traditional growth for companies, both startups and large developed operating companies. But one of the things that I have kind of learned over the years, and as I've been mentioning, is a big part of the struggle almost all companies have, both large and small, is kind of dealing with NPE activity. And so a lot of the kind of more traditional routes, and I'm completely in favor of building patent portfolios and investing in IP. One of the things that I think is important is if we're going to complain about NPEs buying invalid patents and suing companies with them, well, then I think it's important that companies getting patents are doing the work to make sure that the patents they're getting are actually high quality, good patents. And that might take a little bit of money, and it might take a little bit of restraint on behalf of attorneys and patent bar out there, because we can do prior art searching before we file patent applications. And in fact, one of the services in Unified IP Services does exactly that. We do kind of patentability searches to say, okay, is this idea out there? Or is something similar out there that makes it so close that if we're going to try to get a patent, it wouldn't be a very high quality patent? Doing that work up front is, I think, a really great thing. A lot of companies don't spend that money to do those kind of patentability searches. They don't go out and try to make sure that some of the patents they're going after are likely to be super high quality. Unfortunately, I know this because I've been at the patent office and I've did patent prosecution for a few years. So I am really well aware of the world of prosecution and the work you can do to get patents. And, sometimes you're building patents just for the sake of building a portfolio and having a large number of patents. But sometimes companies that do that end up failing or end up having financial trouble, and they sell their patents, and the patents go out there in the wild. And some of those patents that originally thought they could never do some harm end up in the hands of an NPE, and then they end up costing the industry way more to fight than it ever cost to get those patents. And it wasn't that difficult for someone to go out, do a prior art research, figure out that patent is invalid. And in the case of Unified, we do a lot of that work to ultimately end up showing that patent should never have issued in the first place. My personal take is that, companies and the patent community, patent prosecution world and others, it would be a bit, if we're going to complain about NPE activity and how poor some of the patents are that get monetized, well, then we should be doing our own work to make sure that we're not contributing to that problem by helping get patents that are of low quality. The Patent Office does its job, and I think they do a great job. Having been there, I don't think they do the perfect job. And in many cases, the examiners don't have enough time to get all of the patent research done that they really need to in order to show that an idea shouldn't have issued. So I am, sympathetic to the position of patent examiners and sympathetic to the difficult role that the USPTO has. And I feel like this is one of those things where the Patent Office is got one role to play. But I think there's an opportunity for the patent community to make sure that we maybe do more. For companies, my advice would be, let's all try to spend a little bit more on patent prosecution up front with an acknowledgement and understanding that you might have fewer total number of patents on the back end, but they'll all be of higher quality. And I think that will serve the entire community and the industry, patent community, far better in the long run. So that's my little pitch on how we can all chip in and do something about patent
Work
quality.
on that $1 million for you, okay?
Yeah, get that $1 million for me.
Well, wrapping up, I just want to applaud you and using one of the phrase that Jonathan always talk about, the team, right? I think as founders and also as the face of Unified Patents, there's the different people that goes out there and be the face of the company, but there's so much work that were done behind the scene. I often have people asking me, I am not convinced that there's not two of you. I mean, there's not two Kevin Jakel, there's only one. There's one actually, Cheung. So I think that developing the next generation of leaders is so important. Instead of talking about the people in school, I wanted to kind of pick your brain in terms of what's your philosophy of developing the leaders within your company?
My philosophy is give people lots of opportunity to really grow. So people tend to, in my opinion, rise to the occasion. You starting your company, I get it. It's a big leap. It's a lot of work. And so, going out and doing that, it's in many cases, it's very similar to what it takes to kind of help grow people inside the company. is giving them opportunities to take on new tasks and do new things and kind of grow into those new opportunities. And so I think you gotta trust that people are going to kind of grow, expand, and meet those new demands. And this is something that I think we, internal to the company, we're a small company, it's a flat organization. Opportunities are not as large as they would be at some bigger organizations, but we try very hard to make sure that everyone gets as kind of much opportunity for growth as they want, and they can take, let people take a shot at it. And if they're successful, and they usually are, then they've grown and the company's better for it.
Well, thank you, Kevin Jakel. This has been amazing. I usually come see you running at conferences, but I never had this opportunity to speak with you in depth. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on everything you've built. We are huge fans of yours, and thank you.
I have a book for you.
And thank you so much for inviting me on. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.